Hello, everybody. Welcome to Giants podcast. This is our third episode. We have Johny Kello, really good friend of ours, managing director at Landmark Commercial Real Estate, CEO of MatchRX, which is an unbelievable company. I think is around 13 years old now, 36 states, 7,100 different pharmacies that they are working with, and we'll get into that. But we're super excited to have them, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, John.
We typically kick off our conversation with a quote, and this one's a classic from Winston Churchill, one of my favorites. He said, "Success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." How do you identify with that?
No. A story of my life. I mean, seriously. I mean, that old adage, you fail forward, right? This has been a journey from 12 years old, what is that? Paper route through the party store business, through college. Graduated college, by the way, John. Didn't like that question you had out there, okay?
Where?
No, it's okay. I'm kidding. Yeah, that's right. No, and worked throughout that whole time up until today, obviously, and continue to do that. But so many failures in the middle of all that to get to where we're at. And we continue, by the way, I mean, we're still swinging the bat, and sometimes we're hitting it, and sometimes we're not. And, even with Match Square, which is a year old, and we'll talk about that in a while, we're still going to figure out if this is a hit or not a hit. But that is really, it epitomizes, I think, my entire, journey in business. Not so much socially, but business. Just failing forward, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
You seem enthusiastic. When I met you, you have an uplifting, positive vibe about you that seems enthusiastic as well. Have you always been enthusiastic, even in those tough times? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, most of the time, you fake it till you make it, all that jazz. But really, I think that if you don't keep a positive attitude and you let the moment get at you, then I think, that's when you start slipping. And you got to fight through those. As long as we're swinging the bat, as long as we're taking shots, I don't care if you miss. Yeah, you just keep on doing it. And then you've got to do it and have fun doing it. That's the one thing that we do at MatchRX. Is it's the culture like you guys have done here at Dobi. It's all about the people and what we, the attitude that we bring in to the office every day. And it starts with Simon here, and it starts a little bit with me over at that office on, if you're up, they're up, right? And if you don't bring it to, the show every day, then, you know what? They can feel that, and it drags. So, even on days that you're not feeling 100%, you kind of try to your best to be there.
Did that always, is that something that you always understood? Or like you said, upbeat, having fun. And it's hard to do because you're running this business, and everyone's like, oh, it's not personal, it's business. But when it's your business, it affects everything. It affects your home life, your marriage, your kids. I mean, you're at dinner. This is me I'm speaking about. You're at dinner and you're thinking about things rather than being present. And it is personal. Your family is feeling it. And then you just kind of get, you get uncomfortable. You be comfortable being uncomfortable. And you're like, you know what? This is what it is. We gotta, is that something you always had? Do you remember a moment that happened or a challenge that happened that you're kind of like, fuck it, this is business and I can't take it personal and I'm just gonna have to get used to this? When did that start to become being able to manage that? Because it's hard.
That's a good question. I think it wasn't until I was in the commercial real estate business, which I started late in life. I was in my late 20s when I got there, and I started realizing you have to compartmentalize everything, right? And so you try to, keep it in that box and not let it bleed over into everything else. I think that's when I started learning that shit happens every single day, and if you let it let it get to you, then you're going to get beat up, right? And you almost expect it. So, and well, it is not almost expect, you expect it all the time. So when it does happen, whether it's a team member coming to you about something or HR coming to you about something, I used to like get knotted up, right? Or if it was a client back in the real estate business, right? I would get knotted up. Now I'm like, that's just part of the business. And so if you kind of like, you know, get pulled into every little bump in the road, Jesus, you know, you'll never get to your destination, right? So it's just become part of my life. A problem's gonna happen, I expect it, and the only thing that I would tell you that I think I've done a pretty decent job of is I've prepared for it. I've built up my brownie points, you know? I've made it so that if it does stumble, or when it does stumble, not if, but when, it's just a ripple. It's not like this tidal wave that's gonna knock your ass over.
Yeah, you expect it. That's like the best way of putting it. But it's really hard. Those knots, you know, like I used to get like that when an agent would want to leave Dobi, right? And you'd be like, what? Why? Now it's like, listen, the same for everybody.
That's right.
It is what it is. You wake up every day and you're kind of just like, all right, like what challenges am I going to hit today? And we're going to figure them out, right? That still working on it. It's always a work in process, but I always find that very fascinating. And, you know, I realized it, you know, my dad was a business owner, and I realized it at a young age when I saw my dad in his 40s. And you know, when you're in your teenager, young 20s, you think you know what you're doing. You think you're kind of a little cocky, right? And then you get into you know, I remember being with my dad during a really tough thing that we went through. And I was like, this guy's a badass. But you're like, this guy's been doing this for 20 plus years. You know what I mean? So it's a process. Now, MatchRX, real estate, you know, it's business. Yeah. That's the common denominator. Yeah. Real estate and drugs. I mean, what is, you know, how did MatchRX come about when you were, you know, you said in your late 20s getting into real estate? Tell me about MatchRX, where it came from, how you thought of it, and what it does.
All right, first of all, it wasn't my idea.
Okay.
It was my partner Gabe Zawaideh's idea. We're still partners, very good friends, enemies on the golf course on so many levels, but that's a different story.
So he should be on this show, not you, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the genesis. We launched in 2010. Everybody remembers the real estate, you know, crash in 08, 09, and the market crash and everything else. And so I got a call from a niece of mine who said, hey, she just come back from Boston about this medical record keeping, electronic medical record keeping, which is now this huge business, right? I should have done that. But anyway, she comes to me and I said, I don't know. I don't even know I wouldn't even know where to start. So let me call a friend of mine who's like, you know, kind of the closest thing I knew back then to was somebody who being a doctor. Now we know everybody's a doctor. But back then, you know, we didn't know anybody. So I called Gabe up, who I kind of only knew really through golf and you know, friendly chat. But I said, hey, here's an idea. He's like, he goes, I got this great idea. It's called Pill Hub. StubHub, Pill Hub. All right? And he said, I've had it on the shelf for like 3 years. And he tells me about it. It's about overstock drugs for independent pharmacies, and they want to get rid of it. And how do they get rid of it? Well, the only way to get rid of it is by finding other pharmacies to buy it, right? Or if it expires, it's worthless. So I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. I said, is anybody doing it? He's like, not in any meaningful way. I said, okay, well, let's do it. He goes, what the hell do you know? I said, I don't know. I said, we'll figure it out. So the only person I knew in the IT business was my cousin who owned some like internet modeling agency. We hired his IT director, developer. We moved into this little office in Sheffield at Troy, at Big Beaver and Coolidge. And we just went to work. I hired like a copywriter, a graphic designer. The website looked like shit, but it operated. And Nofel our guy Nofel Akash, who did this, did a great job of developing this for us. So we just literally went from 3 pharmacies, him, his mom, his brother, to the 7,100 plus we have today. But all like grinding it out, phone calls, direct mailers, and we started with 3 people in this little office, and now we've got, you know, whatever it is, 30 something people in downtown Royal Oak. We got a cool office in Not as cool as this, but it's cool. But it was really Gabe's idea, and the two of us bootstrapped it from the ground up. We, begged, borrowed, and stole our own money, and really just started one at a time. I mean, we went from 3 pharmacies to 4 and 4 to 5, and we would get like 5 pharmacies signed up in one day. We'd like celebrate. And I thought at the time, if we could just do like 30 grand a month in rev, we'd break even. And it took us, whatever. And every time you got to that number, of course, would increase, and like every business, right? But after about a couple years of like grinding it out, losing sleep, working 2 jobs, I was still heavily involved in commercial real estate, still am involved in commercial real estate, but heavily back then. So I was just like burning it on both ends and losing sleep on, is this dumb idea really gonna work? And are people gonna really buy into it? And over time, we found that we really did create a good value proposition for these pharmacies. And now it just, I won't say it doesn't run itself, like nothing runs itself, but we definitely have a marketplace that feeds itself. Buyers and sellers, come to meet with us, and we just make it as simple as possible.
That's neat. So before MatchRX, pharmacies would just call each other?
That's it. And you'd have 5 people to call. Now you have 7,000 people to touch.
So you're they're posting their inventory, and whoever wants it can buy it and trade it or whatever.
Right. And there's a lot more to it, right? Obviously, like anything else. But the idea is that it is a seamless transaction. It's a point and click. They never talk to each other. They never see each other. FedEx picks up the product from the seller, delivers it to the buyer. We ACH the transactions, and then we have a fee on each transaction. That's cool. And we never touch it. So we've got customer service if there's issues, all that jazz. But that's it's a really simple, very complicated, very, very regulated business.
Well, you mentioned regulated, and that was sort of my question. I saw on your website, it says something like some acronym DSSC.
Yeah, DSCSA.
DSCSA. Yeah. What is that? Is there a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that you had to cut through with the government to get this going?
So much. So we started it and not really knowing if we're supposed to be licensed, not supposed to be licensed. We were like, okay, we'd call the state board to see if it was allowed in that specific state. Well, we'd call the association. We didn't know we were calling the wrong people. And they'd be like, yeah, sure. So about 5 or 6 times, the states would call us like, you can't do this. We're like, oh shit, we can't? So then we would go visit the state board, and we would, so we've gone through probably 8 or 9 different times. We've gone to different state boards and had, showed them the business model and get them to understand what we do. And again, the team, and I give credit to the team really, who's built this really secure marketplace that protects both pharmacies and patients. But it took us, it continues to evolve, but that first 4 or 5 years, we were just kind of learning the rules and regs on this thing. And that's why we're in 36 states. We kind of gradually grew it out, grew it back down, then grew it back up, just through communicating with the states on how we do things, because it's all about safety first, and that's what we really focus on, and then business second.
So you mentioned, you knew you had a cousin that was kind of in the IT. Once you got into it, how much of it was, how much of, because you do think of a platform like this as a technology company, but obviously you've created a platform and it's technology, but is there a ton of synergy between traditional business, like you said, picking up the phone, calling pharmacies? To me, that's traditional business, right? Was that seamless? Was it hard? Once you realize, okay, once I have the right tech guy, this is just business, right? I mean, because I think a lot of people out there think oh, it's technology, I can't do that. Where did you ever have that thought? This is technology, that's not me. No, it's business, right?
So, I mean, you and I operate EOS, right? I mean, business is people and processes, right? So it's just a matter of putting the pieces of the puzzles together, and you can pretty much, immigrants, we think we can do anything, right? And no one tells us we can't. So we just keep on doing it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes it doesn't. So yes, it's just that. It's just business. But to address that other piece of the question, which is you build it and then it runs itself. No, there's no such thing, right? So it is another business. It is marketing. It is sales. You've got to stay in front of your customer, out of sight, out of mind, all these things that come, because I don't care who it is, whether it's a pharmacist or it's a real estate agent or anybody, if you're not in front of them producing your goods, right, or reminding them of your service and your value add proposition, well, then they're going to forget. I mean, they don't want to, but everybody's busy. So we are constantly staying in front of them and explaining to them our value props. Also adding feature functionalities. We're doing this really cool, feature functionality. We've been building it for about a year. We've got like 8 IT team members on our team so everything we build is proprietary. And we're building this piece where it's going to allow secondary wholesalers to sell directly to our members. So it's a whole nother business that we're adding on top of this, but it's a little bit easier because instead of going from 3 pharmacies to 7,000, we want to go from 7,000 to, 15 or 20,000 pharmacies, because we're going to be allowed to operate in all 48 lower states here.
Beautiful.
So it's constantly evolving its work.
Without naming if they exist, is there a competitor who does something just like you? Is it just competition with what existed before? And what is it like having a competitor if one exists?
Yeah, so there is competitors out there. We had the good fortune of doing 2 things. One is we were probably the second player in the market, but the first player, it was a kind of it was like an eBay. You'd have to call the other pharmacy, you'd find the listing, and there'd be this discussion, and we said no, we get rid of all that. So let's make it seamless. So the first thing we did, we made it seamless. So it's just a point and click, and everything happens on its own. You don't have to talk to anybody. So that was the first piece of the equation. So we got that. We were in that market by ourselves for almost 10 years. There was a couple players that jumped in, but we've had the good fortune of building up a wall of a marketplace. And so when you come in, you're coming in to see 60,000 products on our site today, right? And if somebody came in and said, hey, we're going to open John Leonis RX, right? Well, okay, great. Now John's going to have 50 pharmacies or 100. We've got 7,000. John's going to have 1,000 products. Well, it's hard to make a market, right, when you do that. And you see that with even NFL tickets. They can't beat up StubHub. As strong as the NFL is, StubHub still is the place we all go to, right? It's the same idea. Yes, there's competitors, but we had the good fortune of being, first to market for the most part in the business model that we operate in. And so we've built up a wall like Game of Thrones, except there's no dragons.
How long did it take to where you were so you started in 2010, where you were we've created that wall,
I mean, I probably didn't feel comfortable till 17,
7 years.
Yeah, probably about, I mean, realistically, and even today, I always feel that guy in the, what's that Guinness commercial? That ostrich is chasing him and he's always running, I feel like that every single day.
Well, it's hard to turn off. You live that way for 7 years. You don't turn it off. You're out now you're fearing.
No, we've lived like that for 30 years, 40 years.
Exactly.
That's not 7 years. This is our entire life. This is who we are.
Right.
So we just don't turn it off,
Right. That's interesting. What, real estate, you got into that. How old are you? You said late 20s?
Yeah, and that was by accident too.
That was by accident as well. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so after college, I bounced around and did, we opened up a laundromat. We did a basketball gym. We had a place called Hoopsville in Farmington Hills. So, we just, like I said, we thought we could do anything, and we ended up selling that thing for a song, and but. Anyways, fast forward, I was looking for an opportunity, and I was looking at this franchise opportunity, and I met with this guy named Randy Thomas. He was the listing broker on this little strip center in Southgate area.
Is that a relative of yours? Or no.
No, yeah. but Randy's like, I said to Randy, hey, wow, I've always considered looking at, getting into commercial real estate, but I wouldn't know how to do it. He's like, why don't you come on by an interview? Long story short, I do it. I get, I talked to a good friend, all of us know Arkin Jonah. Arkin, where should I go? And he said, go to Landmark. I'm like, okay, I go to Landmark. And they're like, well, we are not into teaching anybody new. Why don't you go somewhere else? So I ended up at Showstack Brothers. And I was there. They gave me this, literally a broom closet next to the copy machine, a phone. And Randy's like, okay, start doing A, B, and C. And anyways, I just started dialing for dollars and started driving around, didn't know what I was doing for a long time. And all of a sudden I started, it started clicking, and it wasn't just because, it was just because who we are, right? You just figure things out. You don't just wait for somebody to tell you what to do. You just keep figuring things out. And they were training, so there was a process, but not like this whole on, program. And it took me about 3 years to finally kind of understand how to actually do things on my own. I was making a couple bucks, and after about, 4 years into it, I started developing this relationship with, as a tenant rep broker with AutoZone and Family Dollar specifically, and a couple others, but those two specifically. And I started realizing all these developers that were out there are making all the money that I'm just putting these connections together, and they take it, and I made my commission, but these guys made all this other. I'm like, this guy's no smarter than us. We could do this. So I found a partner, a guy named Sam Yaldo, super guy. We're still partners, greatest guy, older, was a developer, contractor, whatever, all the hats, and we connected. And then I started just taking the relationship that I had with Family Dollar and AutoZone and said, hey, let me build these for you. And they're like, what do you know? I got a guy, don't worry. I got a guy. And we did. And then we just started. And when the market crashed, when we were launching MatchRX, during that whole time, there was 2 tenants, or more than 2, but my 2 tenants, which were, as the economy was sinking, those stores were doing better. AutoZone, no one's buying new cars. Family Dollar, they're not shopping Target, they're shopping Family Dollar. So I went on this we went on this 10-year run where we were just building these things, and I was brokering still, and then MatchRX was starting to get its feet underneath it. So a lot of busy times during that stretch to kind of finally, find a nice coast, not coast, because we never coast, but you know what I mean? Sure. Just not completely all day, every day.
What I find really interesting about you is when I first met you, I met you through my cousin Lewis, and you are at Landmark with him, and I just looked at you as in the real estate game. I had no clue about MatchRX. And then once we started golfing a little bit, I remember hearing about MatchRX. I'm like, what is this? Johnny's the CEO of this pharmacy, online tech company. I'm like, what? That's crazy, because they're 2 totally different things. I didn't know that. But how much of your time is with real estate versus MatchRX now?
Yeah. So I would say real estate a lot less. I still have an office at Landmark, and I still do some brokerage, not quite as much as I used to. Still doing some development work. I actually got a project that I'm doing right now. If anybody has a spot or a tenant in Ypsilanti Township, no kidding. In Township? Ypsilanti Township, okay. No, I'm kidding. But I'm still doing that. But I would say if you said as a percent of my time, I'd say 20% of my time is spent on MatchRX. 60% of my time is spent on Match Square, which is the new launch. Because MatchRX, I've got a COO that runs day-to-day operation, but I'm still, involved in, the level 10 meetings, the quarterlies, any direction. This wholesale component that I'm talking about is being, driven, by yours truly. So those are the things that, I don't necessarily have to spend as much time anymore, because after a while you build up a team, and a real competent team. And so I think that on the real estate side, I've got somebody who handles all my own properties, that handles all the comings and goings there. On the MatchRX side, I've got somebody who really can help, run the day-to-day. And then Match Square, which is something we can touch on. That is, in its growth mode and early stage mode. So, my heart and soul is now being poured into that. And so is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So,
Building a team is challenging. How have you found success in building the right team? Probably through some trial and error, but what has been the sweet spot for you in recruiting and retaining?
Yeah. Great question. The first order of business is that I should not do any hiring. Okay, I'm the worst person to do hiring. I was terrible. I'd introduce somebody, nice person, bring them on. 2 months later, they're the devil. They're either quitting or firing them, right? So I did that for, 3-4 years. Finally, I got Mike Galloway, our COO, who's still our COO. I brought him in. I'm like, Mike, please do this. Because you can't do everything. You don't know how to do everything. And the other piece of it is that you think everybody thinks like you. They don't, right? So a couple other things we did was we built a culture through some core values. We learned, through EOS, which we adopted about 10 years ago, really how to kind of take all those fragmented pieces of running a business and tighten the ship up. And I think that, again, I think you've done that as well. So I did that, brought somebody in, and we have now an HR person. And then it goes back to what we talked about. It's people and processes, right? Core values on hiring and firing, and you get better at it. And by giving it to folks who really know what they're doing, it gets much easier than me doing it. So, yeah, and now I will tell you, we've got team members. I bet half of our team has been there for 6 years or more, maybe more of them. It might be more than that. But we've really built that kind of culture over there. It's not for everybody, right? But for those who buy into, taking care, and I like that Richard Branson, philosophy. Don't worry about your customer. Take care of your team. They'll take care of your customer.
We literally just had a meeting about that. We had our staff meeting before this podcast, and it took me about 3.5, 4 years, really, probably about 4 years. We've been open 5 to understand that. You have this client, you're like, let's do whatever it takes to keep them, whatever they need, right? But you can't grow that way. And when we started directing our attention towards the team and not the client, which is our agent, our team is to support our clients, and we give a great experience, and that doesn't go away. And you care about your clients as people and their needs and wants, but it's the only way you can grow. But you just have this aha moment where you're like, all right, this isn't about this agent. This is about the system, the process, the team, the experience, the culture. It's about all that stuff, and it's hard to do. It's very hard to do, and it's never ending. I also think too, you've done a lot, and you've worked your ass off, and you've done. You're doing some remarkable things. How taxing was this? I always see entrepreneurs, and I either think they're either divorced or they have the best wife in the world. It's virtually impossible. It's virtually impossible to do something like you've done without that support staff at home. You have a beautiful family. How taxing was that on your family while doing all of this?
Again, good question. So, I don't think they noticed it, because they always, up until 4 or 5 years ago, all they knew is that I worked all the time. So they didn't know when. Even to today, I'll be up at, 5:30 in the morning, and I'll push an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of work. If I don't work out, I go back to sleep. But they don't know all of that going on. So I would tell you that they didn't see a lot of change. Other than maybe some frustration on my part, which I wasn't always good at hiding, not towards them, but just in general, not being in the moment, like you said earlier. But otherwise, I would say Layla's been, she's super mom, she's super wife, all that jazz. So that goes a long way, right? You got to have somebody who's on your team and, just like in your office at your home. And she was always there and, fully supported everything that we were doing and knew that we were, rolling dice and, she was all in. So I would tell you that I don't think they were terribly affected. I think that today though, the noticeable difference is my youngest one, he's 16. I've done way many more trips with him. He goes to squash tournaments around the country. So I'm always with him for those things, right? Tennis matches, like yesterday, 4:00, I can be there. Before, I was just getting to the hockey game or something like that. So there was some of that, right? Yeah. But
your kids have two totally different dads, your youngest and your oldest.
That's right. And they're different people too. It's funny. I mean, you have 4 kids and they're 4 different people. Yeah. I mean, you now have 4. Well, yeah. It's awesome.
We just had our 4th baby a couple days ago, and this baby doesn't even move, and the house has changed. I'm like, how is the house, like it doesn't even move from its spot, and the house is just louder. It's like, how'd that 4th baby do that? It's not even doing anything, Everything's just louder now. But no, that's awesome. I grew up in a household with an entrepreneur, a family where it was a roller coaster, ups and downs. And I see a lot of people who would love to start their own businesses and do things, and they have great ideas and they'd be great at it, but they have a spouse or a significant other that just wouldn't allow it. You know what I mean? And I think it's a shame but I get it. It's hard, it's scary, it's all of these things. And when I see people who have done great things over because it takes a long time, you have to have a lot of good things going on, and your family, your wife, your husband, whatever it is, has to be on board, because there's a lot of, you're working a ton of hours, but you might not reap the benefits for a long time, and stuff like that. So I always find it interesting when I see self-made guys and guys who've done what you've done. So 4 kids. You grew up in a huge family. How many siblings?
10.
10.
I'm the 10th out of 11. So I got 5 brothers and 5 sisters.
Wow. Yeah. What was that like?
Well, I don't know. They were never all in the same house, right? I mean, one was being produced and the other was being moving out. Some were in this country, some weren't. I got here when I was like 3 years old, so I'm like a half immigrant. I was born there, but I got.
So your oldest siblings definitely had different times than you as the younger one.
Even I would go everybody up, even including my brother that's just older than me, because me and my sister and I were the only 2 that went to college and graduated. And the difference though is that they helped us get to that point. Like had it not been for them, we would have, been having to, go out and, break coal in the coal mine. Right. So, and we did, by the way, like I said, probably since the time I was like, 13, I was working in the store, doing the bottles and, doing the coolers and up through managing the store at, Jory Road and Dexter and all that stuff. So we always worked, right? And growing up, we probably, we moved to Detroit, and we moved in this great, like that Chaldean neighborhood, 7 Mile and Woodward on Bauman. And like when we moved in there, it was like Norman Rockwell, right? And then when we moved out, it was like LA Crips and Bloods by the time we moved out in like 87. Yeah. And we kept telling my mom, it's really about time. She's like, no, it's fine. I'm like, it's a shithole. Okay. She's like, no, it's fine. We finally moved to Oak Park, like George Jefferson, we moved on up, right? And then after about a couple months of living in Oak Park, my mom's like, oh, we should have moved here a long time ago. I'm like, no, thanks, Mom. Good idea. But back to the point of the family and the support. I mean, everybody lives close by. Everybody still supports each other. Everybody's friends. We don't see each other as much anymore because everybody's a grandfather or grandmother. They've got their own lives that they go on with. But we still see each other, and we still obviously love each other. So it's been great, and there's nothing like having a close family that stays close. You're a good example of it. You and all your cousins, despite what you guys do to Lewis.
They're your best friend. Yeah. He's gonna watch this. And, yeah, he's like, oh, guy even made the podcast. So
Lewis, you made it.
no, but family. They're my best friends, and they're another big reason why I can do what I do, and gave me the confidence. Because you're like, if we fail, like. The big joke is always like, okay, worst case, you lose your house. I'll move in with my brother. Like, that's worst case, right? Like, what's so big about that? We'd have a blast if we did that. So, now, you also talked about a spin-off, Match Square.
Yeah.
Not to jump around, but what is Match Square? What is that?
Yeah, so, and I'm going to liken it to what you're doing right now, and let me explain what Match Square is first. So Match Square is another online marketplace that allows unique retailers, pharmacies initially is who we started with, and we're moving on to others, even hotels now and others, that allow them to buy, it's a B2B, from unique makers of products. So everything from, like, you might buy, let's say, a Dove bar soap at Kroger. Well, but if you go to Village Pharmacy, you're gonna find like Luma bar soaps, right? It's, a handmade or small batch manufacturing products, really unique. We've got about 900 brands on the site now. We've got like 90,000 unique products and about 280,000 products. We launched less than a year ago, but we're starting to do what you guys did here at Dobi a little bit, and I'll explain the correlation. One is that our business is putting retailers and unique makers of products together. Okay, and small retailers, gift shops, grocery stores, even gas stations, who want to sell unique products so that they separate themselves from the public, right? Or from the general merchandise stores. But what we're finding is our customer really is the brand. Our customer is associations. And what we're looking at is now leaving that marketplace and doing what it does, but really focusing on helping the brand sell more product. And the way we're doing that is we're partnering with them. So we're saying, look, you bring your customers to us, we'll let you have a whole online marketplace for free. We'll let your customers buy from us for free, okay? We'll operate your marketplace for you. On top of that, when a customer of yours buys from another brand, you'll also earn a rev share in that piece. So it goes back to, I think, a little bit about what you said. Yes, the home buyer or the home seller is the ultimate client, but you at where you sit, the real customer is the agents that help those folks execute. And that's the same thing here for us. We're finding that where we can be best serving the ultimate user, the retailer or the brand, is having the brand helping them execute, or helping an association or a conglomerate execute on that. So that's what we're working through right now. So these are like the things that you learn when you launch a business. Despite the fact that you think you know a lot, you don't know anything until you're in the weeds and you're actually executing, and then you find out that, oh, what a shit plan that was. But
then it's too late. You got to go. You got to figure it out. That's why the best time to do it. Yeah, that's why the best thing to do is just keep going, because so that's another business.
Whole nother business, whole different group of people.
Different people.
I have a little crossover, a little bit of marketing crossover, but totally different sales, different IT. It's a whole nother team.
How important is it to split that team up? Like in the beginning, did you try to use the same team?
Not as much as I could, because you're trying to save on dollars and what have you. But ultimately, you're getting to a point where if you're really going to form a company, you got to form a company. It's you're either you're stealing second or you're not. You can't keep your foot on first base and get to second base, right?
Which is a major investment. When you start getting into people and more, you think you can cross-train and do all this stuff, and you can to an extent, but, we experience that now with like recruiting. That's our thing. Like, we need to get more agents, we need to get quality of agents, we need to train. You need to train agents, you need to recruit agents, you need to retain agents. They're separate teams. And in the beginning, you're like, Rena and I are recruiting, we're doing sales, John's jumping in and helping because he was the third guy here, and then you're just like, no, you got to think about recruiting all day, every day. That's all you think about. You need to think about retaining these people. You got to build those teams, and that's
the natural growth of a business.
That's the natural growth of a business. You have to do that, and I think there's a lot of people who get stuck at that small business. Which you're small for a long time, but that mindset and just run a little small business because they can't delegate and get to that point. I mean, you started this thing, you had some good people around you, but did you have a really strong mentor? Did you have somebody teaching you how to make that jump, or was it just natural or over enough frustration to where you did it?
I think I didn't have like one specific person, but I always leaned on a lot of people. I would go to a lot of people for advice. Podcasts just started coming into play, but I listen to a ton of podcasts. I mean, I do this real estate class with my son and one of his associates every week for 1 hour a week, and I'm like always about like, guys, I'm 56. I'm still learning every day, and I don't care who if I'm learning from Simon or John or a podcast or reading a book So the answer is I didn't have one specific person, but I did lean on a handful of people that are kind of in the entrepreneurial space that kind of gave me some direction on key points on what I think I should be doing. And one of the things that I could have done better earlier on is not double down, but triple down on marketing and sales, right? Just accelerate growth versus gradual growth. If I was to go back and do it again, I would have tripled the sales force from the get-go, because once you see that you can bake, well then just get a bunch of bakers and start baking.
Yeah,
right?
the ROI is there, and that's why you hear this analogy all the time. It takes you 3 to 4 homes, building 3 or 4 homes, personal homes, before you get it right. It's it takes you 15 to 20 years to build the first company. And whatever, it'll take you half that time to do it. If you had to do it again, it would take you that knowledge. But it's scary. All of a sudden, all these people, you don't know if it's going to work, right? That's a scary thing. It's easier said than done. My mentor, who's my brother, he's always from 5 years ago, recruit. And I'm like, bro, I got this. I know it's about recruiting, but it's all. And then now, 5 years later, I'm like, he was right. I should have been recruiting the whole time from day one, right? But it sounds terrible because you're like, well, you don't care about the people you recruited. No, you love the people you recruited, but that's the business we're in.
As you're learning so much as you go, how do you create a goal for the long-term future? I mean, what are your goals for the long-term future, knowing that you're going to learn a lot on the way and that kind of thing, but what do you see 10 years down the road for you and your business?
Yeah. So for me, 10 years from now, even probably shorter period of time, my goal is that my boys and I are doing something together, right? Even my daughter, if she wanted to. But really, I'd love to have that opportunity to kind of pass on the baton if they want to, right? And it might be in real estate. It could be in a business that they're interested in. But at least take all this working knowledge that. And they're going to make their own mistakes. We all do, and it's best that they do that on their own. But at the same time, instead of starting from zero, at least they could start at a different level. And I just see myself trying to help them if they want it, right? If they want to be in a business, if they want to be entrepreneurial, which I think they're leaning that way, right? But that's what I see. In 10 years, it's not me, grinding it out. It's really helping them, steer them and help them. But if I did that for 5 years and got them in that right pathway, then then they're on their own. I told them I'll never give them anything. I said I'll help you, but I'm not giving you anything. So I'll be on your team, I'll be your partner, but I'm not going to give it to you. My daughter, on the other hand, she'll get everything. Poor boys.
So we had Jeff Shostak on the show, the last show, and they do something really cool that he told me years ago. They have to work 5 years out before they come in to the family business. But you talked about doing a million different things before getting into this. How important is it for you to, at what age do you tell your boys or over how many experiences we're all right, now let's do something? Are you pushing them to do other things outside of you you know, for years, go get your feet wet, go do a lot of different things, and then come back and we'll talk. Like, is that part of the process?
I mean, I think that's kind of a rough sketch of what I've been trying to do, and I think it's being done. So Jacob, my number 2 son, just moved back from Chicago. He worked at Baker Tilly, and now he's downtown working for Bedrock. He's an analyst for them, and he's loving it. He's loving being back home. He's loving his new job. It's just, you know, it's been a complete W for him. Derek's a broker, commercial real estate broker on the investment side with Encore, and so, you know, and he's doing well, and he's continuing to grow, and so they're young. They're young, early and mid 20s. So, you know, let them go out and figure it out, because you can't, you know, I mean, we don't have to tell you, I don't have to explain this, right? You don't want to, you know, hold these guys.
You see it, but do they see it? Like, are they ready to, like, go now? I mean, like, I was ready to go at 21, you know, and I realized, like, you know, you see the importance of the experience, because you're like, man, you're a baby, but you don't think of when you're at that age, you don't think of yourself as a baby. You know what I mean?
That's a good question. I think they see. I think they know that they've got, you know, in training, so to speak, right? Their own training to get to a point where I think everyone will be comfortable. And by the way, I don't think it's a light switch. I don't think it's like, oh yeah, you're going to go from here to here, and this is your new job tomorrow. It's kind of like everything else I think I've done. I've kind of like grown into something, and hopefully, if it's smooth enough, and it never works out perfectly, but the idea would be for them to kind of gradually grow from one to another, and that would be the perfect scenario. And it doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be full time. You know, it could be, I'm full time and I got my side hustle, and my side hustle is growing, and I'm doing my side hustle with Pops or whatever, and then maybe, you know, leapfrog from there. Because I don't have like a place for them to come in and go, oh yeah, take over this. It's, you know, I've got businesses that are running with professionals. Right. They're not coming in to take over those professionals' jobs. They're not qualified, and it's not for them. In the real estate side of the equation, you know, I've got properties that are established. They're not here to, what are they going to do? You know, so they've got to kind of, you know, make their own way. And my hope and goal is that, you know, we'll do it together. We'll have fun doing it though, you know. Yeah, I mean, a good example of who's done that extremely well is our friend, you know, Arkin. Jonah and his team and his family. So, you know, I look at that and go, that's a pretty good, you know, a team to follow.
That's great.
Yeah.
Golf. I love golf. We've played a lot of golf together. How important, like, how much has golf helped you in your business?
Zero.
Zero? Really?
Yeah, really.
Not with networking, relationships, zero?
No, really? No. That's the one thing, like, okay, so I've got, on the MatchRX side, there's 7,000 pharmacies. I've never met one of them, you know, except for Gabe, who's my partner, right? I mean, I shouldn't say none of them, but you get what I'm getting at. So I would say no. On the real estate side, again, it was really, there were maybe a couple, you know, situations here and there, but I do see golf as a big benefit for the right folks, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't, you know, whether it's being a broker in the stock, you know, an analyst or financial advisor, or being an insurance guy, being a supplier, all those guys, I think golf's a big deal, especially if you belong to a good club that everybody wants to play. You know, that makes all the difference in the world. But for me personally, it really hasn't done anything for me. It's
more of just a fun thing to do, stress reliever.
That's it. It's and I just joined a golf club like 7 years ago, knowing that at this stage in my life, the kids are going to be like on their own. My 16-year-old Lucas has a car, and he's got sports and school and social. So, you know, the window opens up pretty darn quick. So I knew that going in, kind of, I thought, all right, in a few years, I'm going to have this, you know, I'm playing golf today.
Nice.
You know,
well,
so.
We can wrap this up. I know, John, you have a couple questions.
Well, I guess I would ask, follow up to that is, what else would be your hobby of choice if it's not golf?
I do play a little paddle tennis, but really just hanging out with the team, hanging out with the family, hanging out with our friends. Simon knows we're all pretty social folks, and just, a little trip here and there, nothing crazy, but just being with the people that you love.
Do you think about being remembered? Do you think about, and I'm not sure at what stage of business or what age you start thinking, well, how am I going to be remembered by people either close to me or even a little bit further than close to me? Do you think about that? And,
That's a morbid question, John.
Well, the next one's even worse.
No. I'm kidding. I mean, not yet. I mean, look, positive energy, positive vibes, I guess is the best, I guess is probably the way I could, hope that I could be remembered is like that, you made somebody else, a little happier.
So if you thought that was morbid, all right, you find yourself rotting in prison, and you have, and you have your last death row meal, right? So what is your death row meal, your last meal that you get to choose? What's your feast?
Easy. That's a tomahawk steak that I grilled myself.
Do you have a favorite quote or motto that you live by?
Yeah. So, and it's the only motto or speech that is hung up in anywhere other. I'm talking about home, office. I don't have any of those like motivational speeches. It's Teddy Roosevelt's in 1910, "The Man in the Arena." That's like the greatest. Like for entrepreneurs, that's it. You're in the arena and you're marred, and you don't worry about what others say, and you can only know true victory by knowing defeat. All the things, and I'm paraphrasing all of it, but it's probably one of the like the motto that I would say I live by every day. Not by, but that would describe me the best is the man in the arena.
A man in the arena. That's great. Well, Johny, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I know you're a busy person. You got a lot going on. I can honestly say, I started Dobi and our companies 5 years ago. I've talked to you a lot about what we do. We've had cigars, and you've helped me out a lot. And I know you probably don't, you don't see it as much as I do. But I can't thank you enough for that. And then also supporting us with this show. It means a lot. So thank you. And, everything you have going on is super impressive, especially from somebody like myself who's sitting here trying to make something work. And it's like, man, like that is, a lot of people I think that's cool and great, but they really don't understand what it takes. And that's kind of the point of this show, is to bring to light really, that's why we ask some personal questions about your family and stuff like that. I mean, I find it super impressive. There's not many people in this world who can do it. So, hats off to you. It's awesome. And thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Johny.
Thanks.
For more episodes of Giants, follow Dobi Real Estate on social at We Are Dobi, and we'll see you next time.